One of the questions that frequently comes up is this is portrayed as that I want to create an armed police response to Portland State University. And I will tell you that you, like every other university, has an armed police response. That's Portland Police Bureau. What I'm suggesting is that we create a police department that's responsive to the university, that is reflects the university's values and mission, that is integrated with all of the university's resources, and that has input from all of the stakeholders, including students. The statute that authorizes university to have police departments requires that the president form a committee that includes university personnel, people at the university, that that can provide opinions on officer behavior and on police policies. You currently don't have that. One of the items that frequently comes up is whenever there's a major faux pas involving anybody, that becomes the topic of discussion. So recently at UC Davis, the pepper spraying incident happened, and that became a meme that we've all seen, and people could use that as perhaps a way to say that we shouldn't have created a police department because things like that happen. What I can tell you is that at UC Davis, that chief lost her job, the lieutenant that became the meme no longer works there, and the third officer no longer works there, because that university police department was responsible to the university, and that great outcry resulted in action. Now, you can ask yourself if you would have that same kind of responsiveness from the larger municipal agency that currently provides armed police services here. I can talk about staffing. Our numbers currently, we have 13 campus public safety officers. We're authorized 15. That still puts us at about 0.5 campus public safety officer per 1,000 students. The national average of universities is 1.8 sworn police officer per 1,000. There are increasing complexities with policing a university, particularly an urban university. About 90% of the arrests that we make or our interactions are with people that are not affiliated with the university. And we asked the Criminal Justice Department to do a study last year at who are we arresting and what's the story on the people that we're arresting. And so they came out with a study that showed that of the people that we arrested in the last 6 years, 41% of them had a recorded history of violent offending, and 87% of them had been arrested at least once prior to their current arrest at PSU. So we're different than a land-grant institution in that our greatest threat comes externally, and the reality is there is a dangerousness to the people that we are arresting on campus. I can give you anecdotal. Mark Bebot, who currently is in custody for murder of a homeless community worker that he had met at a soup kitchen. He was arrested in July of this year. He was also tied into a second homicide of a 15-year-old girl whose body was found at the Vista Tunnel. He was arrested in March of this year for sleeping on campus.
Oh, so that brings us, that's the 10 minutes for that first question.
Okay.
And just a reminder, anyone can raise their hands to talk on a question. But let you keep going because it's good context. And you started talking on our second question, which maybe you could talk more on it, and then perhaps ASPSU or other departments may have some idea about it. But our second question is, what kind of oversight would the department have if these changes were implemented, which you talked on, but more specifically, what would student participation look like within that oversight, if students would have a role, and what capacity?
Sure, and I think that's part of why we're having this discussion today, is what do we want that to look like? Because we have the ability to create this from the ground up, and we have the ability to create a police department that's reflective of our values and our mission. And the one thing that's unique about this is the legislation that was passed last year, 352-383, specifically says in statute, when a university establishes a police department and commissions one or more employees as police officers, The president of the university, in cooperation with the chief of the police department, shall establish a process by which the university will receive and respond to complaints involving the policies of the police department and the conduct of the police officers. So you currently don't have that with your police provider. What that looks like is entirely up to you, and it's entirely up to us as a university on what do we want our police department to look like, what do we want its mission and its values to be, and how do we want them policing the university.
Okay, thank you. We have a question. You can step to that mic.
Hi.
3 minutes.
Okay, I'm Monty here and I write for the Rear Guard. So I guess I have a question about two-parter. One, would students having some say in that, could that possibly take the form of a referendum for students to lend their voice to whether or not they want to see this happen? And two, when you talk about community, like the community policing and stuff, I mean, so is there a possibility that that could take the form of restorative justice? Like, if and when restorative justice could be used, like that might become a tool for the university to get some things done, like beautification and stuff in the form of like community service. Is that a possibility?
Okay, so
Could we turn the power up a little, please?
The volume?
Yeah.
No problem.
My apologies.
So we're going to keep the question geared toward just about student role. Oh, okay. So I'm sorry, do you feel like responding?
sure.
Okay.
So we believe in the restorative justice model. We almost, or I would say all of our alcohol and marijuana violations in res halls go to that restorative justice model through student conduct. They don't go through the court system. I think that what campus policing is the ultimate in community policing. Everybody talks about community policing. Nobody knows what it looks like. I would tell you that what we do is community policing.
Hi, my question is, where is the money going to come from, and what is the intent in terms of, is that appropriate? Can I ask that? I mean, is it going to come from tuition?
That's actually our third or fourth question.
Oh, I thought that was done.
No, sorry.
Okay. Apologies.
So right now we're speaking specifically to student involvement?
Yes. So, go ahead. Dan.
I guess just one of my questions was in terms of student oversight or involvement. Just a theoretical question, you know, what would be your response or the administration's response to the idea, what if the majority of the student body simply did oppose this? After all, arguments were put forth, you know, where would you be coming from? As, you know, I understand that you do, you know, you're putting forth this proposal because you feel that it is in our best interest, but how do you feel about the idea of students making that decision based on, you know, their own information and, you know, the fact, I guess this stems from the fact that there hasn't been a whole lot of dissemination of information on this subject on campus, and concerning the cost issues and the fact that it is a very serious subject for all students on campus, you know, should they have, do you feel that they should have that power? Because I feel that we as students should have the ability to make these decisions.
So I don't know what that looks like. This isn't going to be a popularity contest. What I'm hoping it is it's a very thoughtful discussion that people research the issues, and they come up with a very well thought out decision, and that we decide as a group, as a university, what is most beneficial for everybody that's a stakeholder. I mean, this isn't I'm not jumping this on anybody. One of the first things that I wanted to do was engage students in this discussion, and I'll engage anyone in a discussion about it anytime, and I want to hear what your concerns are.
Hi, I want to thank you, Zerzan, for being here. My name is Mary, and we spoke earlier, and I want to thank you so much for the crime map of 5 of the 10 rapes in 2011. I presented it to City Council a couple of weeks ago, so they have copies, and it's also online if anybody's curious where the rape hotspots are. And I thank you so much for tackling this huge issue, because it's something that's very difficult to talk about. And as a rape survivor myself, I would like to put forward the proposal that the student community gets involved with the security to find prevention strategies and education strategies so that we can all feel very safe and secure here. Thank you.
Hi. To bring us back to specifically student involvement in the proposal we're to go through, you talked about an oversight panel. And what does that exactly look like, and how much room for student voices is there on that president mandated oversight panel? Is that something that is elected? Is that something that gets appointed by the president or by your department? So if you could just kind of flesh that out a little bit, that'd be great.
So we're being handed a blank canvas. So we get to, we get to design from the ground up what that looks like. What would that involvement be? I don't know what it looks like. I would think that if we had a police oversight, or we complied with the statute, that it would certainly include students, because they're our primary stakeholder here.
Sorry. So you're talking about building a process to move forward with these changes that would include students. How do you envision that process going from here? Is it just a process between administration and ASPSU, or is there a way for other students who feel invested in this issue to plug in and begin participating in the process?
So I don't know what this looks like. This is something that is that we're proposing for the first time here. The statute's only existed since 2011. I don't know what this will look like. I don't know what consensus will look like. I don't know how we'll get there. I just want to have this discussion, but I want it to be framed properly, and I want it to include student voices about what do we want law enforcement on our campus to look like.
Where is the university at currently in discussing, in developing this? Is it at the point where it says, yes, we want to redevelop campus safety and security, and we're going through and going to revolutionize this no matter what, we're just trying to decide how? Or is the topic of it happening open to discussion?
So these discussions, the earliest record I can find is in 1976, where I found a paper where they talked about the current model of campus law enforcement is not adequate, and they came up with some proposals. And people have said that what we're doing here is not adequate continuously since then. Most recently, there was a consultant that was hired that identified some shortcomings in what we're doing, and as part of that process, I was brought in here. And I didn't have a dog in this fight. I came in here and looked at what we were doing, and it made it, for me, an issue that I think we really need to move forward on. And I think it can be either driven by a disaster or it can be driven by thoughtful discussion. And I'm hoping it gets driven by thoughtful discussion.
We have one more question in the back before we move to the next number of questions.
It's kind of going back to the first question. I'm curious how this would be better than just having Portland Police Department have a division devoted just to the campus.
That is certainly one of the options, is you could contract with, my belief is that there are 3 options. One is to continue with what we're doing now. The second one is to contract with an outside provider. That could be Portland Police Bureau, the Oregon State Police, which is what OSU does. Oregon State Police says they don't want to have any part of this. And then the third option is to form your own police department. So that is an option. I don't know. I mean, I haven't entertained that possibility. If people think that that's a viable option, then I certainly would pursue that as well.
Well, they're already trained, is why I was thinking.
Right. And so, again, I would just say that this is an opportunity to have a police department that perhaps is more reflective of your values and the mission of the university and understands the complexities of campus policing.
Thank you, Chief Zerzan. You can have a seat. I know you've been on the hot spot for a second there. Thank you. We appreciate it. An article in the Vanguard stated that the Women's Resource Center and the Student Health and Counseling Center support the proposed changes. Can any representatives from these organizations please explain your stance on the proposal?
Hi, my name is Dana Tassin. I'm the Executive Director of Student Health and Counseling here at PSU. And I can speak directly to this question, I think, because we have a very significant involvement in sexual assault response on campus, and something I'm very proud of, and that we've only really been able to do because of the partnership with CPSO. We are now able to provide evidence collection and the beginnings of a sexual assault response and investigation right in the health center. Before, students used to have to go up to OHSU, and I don't know if anyone has been in a hospital emergency room recently. Has anyone done that? It's not a very nice place to go when you're upset. I would love the opportunity to give our students who are survivors of sexual assault the experience of having that response all done in-house by officers that work for the university, that are sensitive to student needs, and that understand the very delicate mental health issues in play. Cool.
Yeah, so WRC wasn't able to send a representative this evening, but I was able to have a meeting with Jessica Amo, who is the assistant director, this morning. And so I'm just she was willing to give me a written statement, and I'm just going to read that to you guys so you have an idea of where her program and the WRC as a whole is on this issue. She writes, as the WRC Assistant Director and Coordinator of our Interpersonal Violence Program, I support the expansion of services. Expanding services will close current service gaps and significantly improve campus safety for students affected by relationship and sexual violence. One of the WRC's top priorities is to ensure that sexual assault survivors are allowed to make decisions about their safety. For those that choose to report to law enforcement, being able to report directly with CPSO will substantially improve and facilitate that process. The WRC has been involved in multiple assault cases handled by CPSO, including those covered last year by the Vanguard. The media coverage of these events generated repeated feedback to me regarding students feeling unsafe on campus and asking for increased security presence. The expansion of services would address many of the concerns raised last year. Not all students or staff affiliated with the WRC feel comfortable with the CPSO expansion, and there are members of the PSU community for whom law enforcement is historically or currently unsafe. It's critical that the conversation regarding expansion includes space for these voices and consideration for these concerns. I have worked closely with Chief Zerzan since he arrived at PSU. I have very much appreciated his collaborative approach and his commitment to improving services for campus overall and for students experiencing sexual assault in particular. He has ensured that CPSO provides certain services for the WRC that Portland Police Bureau cannot provide. For example, appointing a liaison to the WRC, ensuring direct access to CPSO leadership, etc. And supporting the expansion of CPSO will mean the continued growth of much-needed safety services within a campus context that allows for feedback, accountability, and collaboration. And that is from Jessica Amo, who is the Assistant Director of WRC and the head of the Interpersonal Violence Program.
And we have one final question here before we open the floor for general discussions and questions. If anyone can answer, what is the estimated cost for these possible changes, and where will funding for additional expenses be coming from?
So Monica Remay is the Vice President of FATM is supposed to be here, but she is running
All right, I guess we can hold off on that question and wait for Vice Provost Ramah to arrive. I guess now we'll open the floor for discussions. Okay, we have a question here.
So I've got a couple of questions or concerns. One is I'd like to know if we do start having a sworn police force, who does the training? Where will they be trained? Because I have to say, as having come from outside Oregon into Oregon, I don't like the training that the Portland police receive. So I'm wondering whether a different method of training can be given for our people. Second is, would it be necessary, since this hasn't been addressed at all, to arm all of the police officers, or if there could be a two-tiered system where we have armed police and unarmed police? On a college campus, I do get concerned, especially in the United States. It seems that officers have a tendency to react with their weapons before they actually consider what's going on. And that is something that does concern me, especially on our campus, which is the more radical of the campuses in Oregon. So those are two concerns I have, and I also want to know how it's going to be paid for. So when Monica gets here, that would be very good. And the last thing I would like to know is if it could be put in writing from the administration side, exactly what student involvement would be to ensure that students have a in writing agreed upon method of oversight, because I think student oversight, we don't have the experience necessarily, but I think students' values need to be included in oversight of a police force for our community. But I think that having a police force for our community might be a good idea, and Portland police look at a very different thing than they do when they're here, and if we were to contract with Portland police, then they're answerable to the police department, the police union, and the mayor. And if we have our own police force, they would be answerable to the university and the students. And so it does sound like of those two options, our own is a better idea. 10 minutes to response, if you have a response.
Sure. The current model is that all training costs for CPSO are absorbed by the university. Sworn police officers are provided training by the Board on Police Standards and Training in Salem. That's statewide 16-week academy that would be paid for by the state. And then I don't remember the rest of the questions. So.
Oh, tiered police force?
Oh yeah, tiered police force. So typically you have a sworn police department and you have a non-sworn public safety department. I would imagine the same would here. You would have a bifurcated department because there certainly are a lot of functions that don't require a sworn police officer. Locking, unlocking buildings, doing escorts. There's a lot that doesn't require a fully sworn trained police officer. So I imagine the model we would be looking at here would also be bifurcated.
Thank you.
There was a third part of the question.
Student involvement.
It could be put in writing to have like a process for student oversight and the values making and like the process that are put into students.
I certainly think there could be. I mean, that's within the statute. The statute says it compels oversight. What that looks like hasn't been defined. So.
Could you hand it to the young lady with the green scarf?
Hi, my name is Sarah, and I'm curious if, like you said, sort of a big part of the proposal is making the campus more safe for rape survivors and victims of sexual assault. If other options have been explored, especially if it is going to possibly cost up to $2 million, because I think given the just statistics show that 1 in 4 college women are going to be sexually assaulted. 80% are assaulted by someone they know. It's not the sort of victim that happens over behind a tree somewhere. And so I think, and then on top of that, most people, most women don't report anything because of the high victim blaming culture that we have. And I think that really the solution is going to come in and supporting a culture where people can talk about it, where women have networks that they can go where they feel safe to talk about what's happened to them. And I think that especially given, and I just don't think that policing is the answer to that, and I think that given the hyper-male culture of law enforcement and the unique and intensely female experience of rape, it's hard to think of a worse match than law enforcement and rape survivors. And I think that there's so many other things that we could support that probably would be costing a lot less money, just like rape crisis centers, having a 24-hour hotline that's open 7 days a week where women actually feel safe. They know that they can go somewhere anytime. They know that they're not going to be blamed for their situation, which often we've seen, like the slut walk movement happened because police were blaming women, saying, you know, so often a woman goes and reports it to the people that they're told to go and report what happened to them, and they're told, oh, it's because she was drunk, because she wore whatever, she looked too hot, and it's her fault. And I think a lot of women don't, and again, most women don't report what happens because they don't feel safe, and I think that what we need to be supporting is making women feel safe to talk about what's happening to them, and I think that the way to do that isn't policing, and it could probably cost much less than $2 million. And I think also just because another piece of it was supporting students with mental health issues, I think we've seen all across Portland that the police are not the answer to the mental health patients. There's been so many shootings of mental health victims, and I think, and the problem is that police aren't trained to do this work, this kind of social service support work that students, and you know, especially female students need. Everyone could use better counseling services, and I think, again, I think we need to be going back. And I'm curious if other options have been explored. I think the answers to the question that we're just sort of assuming is the answer should be something that is much different than policing. So I'm curious if that is on the table at all. And again, sorry, with that, I think the money part is a key piece, because I'm curious if we're only getting this $2 million, if it's towards policing, towards arming the police, or if we have this $2 million to actually make women and make all students feel safer on campus, because I think that affects the situation.
I'd like to have our Dean of Student Life respond, because she hasn't spoken as yet.
Yeah, hi everybody, I'm Michelle Topie, I'm the Dean of Student Life, and I've worked at Portland State since 1995, so I've seen the campus through a lot of really horrific incidents. I think you heard earlier from Jessica Amo, who's the person I work with most closely around sexual assault response and prevention, and I think what you're saying is really valid. I guess I would go back to what was said earlier, which is what is being advocated is not having Portland Police come to campus, but having our campus public safety office be trained so that they can be equipped and have the capacity to respond appropriately when there is a serious threat of safety to students. So I think that the model that you're advocating and the alternative that you're advocating is actually the one that's being proposed. And you heard Jessica talk about the value of having our internal campus public safety folks be the ones who are doing this. And I can't say this, more strongly than Phil Zerzan is the person who I trust to lead that effort. He is relatively new to the campus, but in the short time that he's been here, he has transformed, as far as I can tell, the relationship that our campus and our students have to campus public safety. The officers that he's brought in and the trainings that he has instituted have created the kind of community policing, the kind of community response that I hear people asking for. And when I call campus safety now, I know that I get an officer who understands the student experience and who cares about the student experience. And I don't know if Phil shared this, but he actually has a student here at Portland State who is his daughter. So he understands very well the student experience. He has 2 other kids who have been through college. So I think just personally speaking on Phil's behalf, he's someone who cares about students, and the programs that he has created and the training that he has instituted and the folks that he has hired really speak to that commitment in a way that I think is truly unique and is not something that we would have if we were to just hire Portland Police to come in like Oregon State does. Anyway, so I think what you're asking for is really valid, and what we have in Campus Public Safety are partners, and I think the Women's Resource Center already spoke to that, and I meet every week with Phil and the director of our counseling center and the assistant director of the Women's Resource Center and others to think about how to create a safe campus, and I know that the commitment that he has to that comes from the heart, and I really trust it.
Thank you. Gentleman in the blue shirt has a question.
Hi, I'm Neil from, I'm with the Student Action Coalition and the International Socialist Organization. And I guess what concerns me more than anything is that this conversation is, I mean, I hear this idea of sort of fluidity or efficiency in investigation, but to me that's, I mean, I'm echoing a couple of people, but that isn't prevention. And I mean, if we're going to create a safe campus, I would much rather see $1.9 million spent towards that than making the investigation process more fluid. I mean, that's obviously a nice thing and everything like that, but is that going to necessarily reduce the upward trend in violence against women on this campus? And there is an upward trend on violence, sexual violence against women on this campus, on the University of Oregon campus, and Oregon State's campus. And is that actually, is an investigation actually going to do that, or is prevention going to? This campus doesn't have a Safe Walk program, and you have students that are looking for jobs. Safe Walk program will work somewhere between $20,000 and $30,000 a year. That's much less than $1.9 million. We have poorly lit walkways. We have vacant parking lots at night. We have plenty of places where women don't feel safe. And this idea has been pushed before when Soto was chief of CPSO, and they were using the Virginia Tech incident as the justification for that. Well, the prevention could have definitely helped that. We have a waiting list for therapists often at SHAC. I know that from personal experience. The person in Virginia Tech was mentally disturbed and a victim of racism for a good chunk of his life. Had there been preventative measures, maybe that wouldn't have happened. So I'm thinking, I mean, it would be interesting to actually get the conversation sort of shifted towards prevention, because I guess I don't really see fluidity in investigation as actually preventing some of these things, and my interests are actually towards making this campus safe for women and making it safe for students in general, as opposed to like making the investigation process just a little bit easier for people to go through after the event has happened. I don't want the events to happen anymore. I want us to actually be proactive in making this a safe campus. Thanks.
I believe Dr. Tassin would like to respond. One second, please.
I think you brought up some very important points about prevention, because prevention is key for mental health crisis and health in general on campus, and certainly important for safety, and I am all on board with that. I think if we look on how to do that, there's no one better suited to help join that effort than a campus police force, as opposed to Portland police, who are certainly well-intended but don't have the resources or the knowledge or the investment in our campus. And so I would welcome CPSO being partners with us in that prevention effort. I think that's a really important point.
You would like to respond?
Yes.
Please.
One of the things that was talked about in that question was the law enforcement response on interpersonal violence. And statistically, when mandatory arrest became part of the landscape in Oregon and in the United States, there was a decrease in domestic violence homicides. So I agree that prevention is key on everything, but I can also say that there is a law enforcement role. At 3 in the morning when interpersonal violence is happening, there needs to be that immediate intervention, and that has to be a law enforcement role. And the statistics do bear out that that response and mandatory arrest did reduce domestic homicides in Oregon and the United States.
We have another question here.
Can I just add one more thing?
Sure.
I just want to make sure the audience understands, because this is an important point. I know if Jessica were here, she'd want to make sure this was stated. So when you look at numbers for interpersonal violence, it is sometimes difficult to know exactly what the trend is, because when you do a better job of getting information out, when you have resources that people trust, usually your reporting goes up. So often when you're doing a better job, your numbers go up. For instance, on campuses where there's not much reported, The data is resoundingly clear. 1 in 4 women report sexual assault when they're in college. If your data says you have 0 or 1 or 2, clearly people are not reporting, not that it's not happening. So I just want to caution folks when you're looking at data to have that skeptical eye of an academic to know that there's something beneath the numbers that may not be clear when you're just looking at the sheer data. So when our numbers go up here, as funny as it sounds, our Women's Resource Center is pleased with that because that means more people are reporting something that's been happening behind closed doors or under a muffled voice that hasn't been, in a place where they felt like they could say something.
Okay. Hi, my name's Ilona, and I just want to say that this is an educational institution. Students come in here with the requirements of taking math and English, science classes for graduation. And I'm wondering why students are not coming in with basic human decency as a requirement. And so there's an amazing variety of educational programs that deal with consent training, that deal with anti-oppression training, that those things could be incorporated into our educational agenda so that when students come in here, they actually know how to be decent people to each other. And we don't have to focus on increasing our police force. We can focus on creating amazing people that come out of here knowing what consent is and knowing how to deal with anti-oppression and oppression. So I just want to hope that you folks consider that in increasing the police force, because that is reactive, not proactive. Thank you.
It sounds like a lot of the university officials are really interested in pushing this program through and think it's a really good idea. And so what I want to know is, since this all seems to be like a blank slate and stuff, I would like to see a proposal come from you guys about, what the student involvement, for example, would look like. Because I don't think it's fair for you to come to us and say, hey guys, what do you want your student involvement in this to look like? Because to me that makes me feel like, oh well, now I have to make this proposal for how I'm going to put police on my campus. And I don't actually want police on my campus, so it feels a little bit patronizing. So yeah, that'd be cool. Thank you.
So I wanted to just, speak to 2 things. One on the issue of cost and where this money is going to come from, and there are 2 statistics that I thought were interesting, because one of them was that I had understood that the large majority of violent crimes that were happening on campus were being perpetrated by people who are not students, people from the broader urban community who are coming onto campus. So in terms of dealing with those crimes that are reported and are being, recorded and addressed by law enforcement, if the majority of those crimes aren't coming from the student body or the campus itself, should students really be the people who have to pay for that law enforcement to protect ourselves in this urban campus? How much involvement or dialogue has there been with the police bureau in terms of their failures to address those crime rates? Because the other issue that I thought, and on the subject of prevention, is that somebody, I believe, already said it, but the vast majority of sexual crimes towards women are perpetrated by someone that the victim knows. And if that's the case, that almost makes me think, combined with the idea that most of the crimes we do know about are being perpetrated by people from off campus, that there's a lot of sexual crime happening that's not being reported, that isn't going to be addressed by a further investigation because, the victim is, not comfortable admitting the fact that they were raped by their boyfriend or their roommate or the guy across the hall. And that, to me, is where the need for preventative measures seems like a much higher priority. That's why I think it would make more sense if we wanted to spend $2 million on rape prevention and addressing those cultural issues. That's something I'd be a lot more in favor of.
So I'm trying to do this as calmly as possible because I'm probably not going to be the most popular voice in the room, but having been a maximum security corrections officer trained at DPSST, which he alluded to before, there is no other training, by the way. The Department of Public Safety Standards and Training determines what the curriculum is for all peace officers. I actually want to see it happen. I was subjected to a hate crime, threatened with physical violence, right outside my housing unit on Sunday. And prevention is all good and well, but when a crime does occur, I want somebody to be there to address it. You can talk about prevention, and that's great, but when it does go down, there needs to be somebody there that's able to address the issues of somebody being victimized on campus right in front of the place where they live. And I'm working with them on that and seeking restorative justice options to help see that student stay here and everything, but still have what happened be addressed because I'm not responsible for someone else's poor choices. The other part of that is I think there's something else that kind of gets glossed over a lot and stuff, and that's with the increase in sexual violence against women, there's also an increase in sexual violence against men. And that's something that's not even being spoke to here. And again, prevention is great, but when the crime goes down, somebody needs to answer for it. And having somebody trained and able to do further investigation and maybe suss out that the crime occurred is going to go a long ways towards a victim being able to have some kind of closure or a starting place to start working on their own healing. And that doesn't happen if it goes unreported or gets reported but then has to wait 3 days for a Portland Police Bureau person to come and talk to them. Then what ends up happening is that person's not willing to talk about it anymore because the climate or culture of shame and stuff is allowed to take over. So I just wanted to talk about a couple of the other viewpoints that are out there that are potentially important as well.
Thank you for that. The other thing, I don't know if all of you have the same experience, but in my office, at least once a day, someone walks into my office and says, I feel unsafe on this campus because I just got robbed, because I just had my backpack stolen, because we need more safety on this campus. We have very permeable boundaries to our campus. We have lots of folks on campus who aren't students here. And we're an opportunity place too. Lots of people on campus have expensive books, they have laptops, they have phones, they have things that are worth stealing. And so people come to campus because there are tons of opportunities for that kind of crime here. I agree with your point. I don't think that we get adequate response by Portland Police, and like I said, I've been here for almost 20 years. I've waited a long time for Portland Police to show up in a really serious situation when I needed them immediately. So knowing that we have a campus public safety who's here, who could respond and be the officer who could help, who lives here, who's on campus 24/7 and can respond 24/7 to incidents that are campus-based would make me feel a whole lot better. But I need folks to know what my experience is in my office, which is I have people come in every day saying they feel unsafe and saying, we need more, we need help. We feel like we're sitting ducks here on campus in a lot of ways for crime. And there's got to be a solution. I want to be a part of it, and I want students to be a part of it. I want students to help us to shape what that looks like, and I think that that's what the chief wants too. So I really appreciate you being here and telling us what you think, and I hope you'll stay engaged. The other thing that I will say, I hear some distrust about, well, we want this in writing, we want to know from the administration what's going to happen. You can fully trust that this process is going to be documented, and we're going to mark every step of the way, and ASPSU is going to help us to do that. So whether you're a part of ASPSU or you want to become a part of ASPSU, it's a little commercial for you. That's a good way to make sure that your voice gets heard, but you don't have to be part of ASPSU to be a part of the process. So.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, Chief, from listening to everybody in here, is the security concerns on campus primarily sexual assault against people, or is it, how much of it is mainly sexual assault versus people getting their laptops stolen and backpacks and things like that, and muggings? Yeah.
Well, crime is a concern, and it runs the gamut from theft all the way up into more serious assaults and sexual assaults. So the concern is that we have a law enforcement agency that works for the university that can address all of those concerns from top to bottom. So.
But the data, you tell them where they can see the data.
Is there any statistics or anything? That's what
What do you? Yeah, we have the clearly reported crimes on campus, and we also have other statistics. I'm not sure what it is you're looking for.
Oh, well, I mean, just I've heard from a couple of people are saying that the $2 million that we're talking about here, that it should be better spent on trying to prevent sexual crimes and stuff. And so I'm wondering, is that something that, I mean, is that like the bulk of the security issues on campus? That, you know, we don't really need to worry about anything else, or is it, I mean, is it evenly distributed? How much of it is actual, you know, interpersonal crime?
So I can't quantify it, but what I can tell you is that one of my greatest concerns is that we don't provide a sexual assault response that addresses some of these issues that have been brought up, like victim blaming or reducing harm or providing an environment of someone who is compassionate and can conduct this investigation in such a way that reduces harm. You know, I agree that prevention is the key, but there also comes a time when you need to have a trained police officer that responds, that can reduce the harm and the impact, and can start working towards healing. And I do think that law enforcement is part of that. So it's a huge part. I can't quantify about what is my greatest concern, what is my least concern. I can tell you that from the day I stepped in here, I have been dissatisfied with how we respond to reports of sexual crimes on this campus.
Hi, my name is Chris, and for a moment I'd like to steer this conversation into a different direction. 6 months ago I was sitting at my friend's house outside smoking a cigarette, and we saw a person of color running down the street being chased by a cop, and there was a reported armed robbery at the local convenience store. And after chasing this person for about a block, the cops stopped, warned him once, and then shot him in the back, and the man died. And there were different inquiries that led after this incident, and the cop was eventually fired. He lost his position, but it doesn't account for the loss of life that occurred on that day. So what are your views on this type of incident, and in what way can we be assured, because there's a lot of negative stigmatism when it comes to armed police force and armed cops with guns, that they are feared by, or they can be feared by regular civilians. So in what way can we be assured that this won't happen, or at least be more comfortable with the idea of arming our police force? If anyone would like to take the mic.
One thing to point out is the Department of Justice is currently investigating the Portland Police Bureau for their pattern of racist murder. That's been covered very well by Cop Watch, but it has to stop. Also, the Department of Justice Office on Violence Against Women is doing comprehensive overhauls of police evaluation of rape on a national basis. The latest report is Louisiana. So that's worth checking out on the DOJ website, because ideally, if the DOJ had the funding they need, they would be overhauling all 50 states and every jurisdiction so that we could make a rape-free world and rape-free campus. And indeed, the issue of male rape victims has to be addressed. We do not want to be that PSU. The Sandusky trial was so traumatizing to us. This last election with the concerns regarding rape and abortion, to me, was very personally traumatizing. Also, we need to pay attention to what some high-profile universities are doing in terms of suppression of evidence. We have the Reed scandal, very worthy to check out what was going on there, because if rape is assessed as a conduct and disciplinary matter, there can be a conflict of interest when this gets brushed under the rug because it disturbs the profile of a high-tuition university like Reed. And that indeed was going on, and that's been going on a lot of campuses across America. So we should definitely pay attention to that, and thank you everybody for being here.
Yes, I did. So I wanted to come back to this idea of you know, having our own PSU campus security would be much more beneficial rather than relying on the PDX Police Bureau. We would be able to have more, you guys were talking a lot about better training and more responsive training and more community-focused training, but then the training is actually being conducted in Salem by the state. As the gentleman in the red hat pointed out, there is only one curriculum for training. So I'm wondering how we feel these police officers are going to be conducting themselves differently than the city police if they're being trained by the same program. So if you can respond to that, that'd be great.
Sure. So the basic certification requires a core curriculum that is paid for by the state, but the individual departments set up their policies, their procedures, and then also their individualized training. So there's after the basic academy is done, there's a one-year FTEP program that's field training experience where they're assigned to an officer and they're still on probation, and then they complete that, and they have to adhere to the policies, procedures, and mission of their home agency.
So who lays out that procedure exactly?
The policies and procedures? Again, by statute, the university president is required to provide input to that. What that looks like is it's a blank canvas. So that would be where the input would be, is the policies, procedures, and the actions of the police officers.
What's your input?
I also have input as the chief. So,
Well, what is it?
what do you mean specifically? What is my input?
What are your thoughts on the matter?
On training? I think that police training currently is lacking in issues of intervention on mental health crises. I think that at a university, there needs to be specific training that's geared towards some of the issues that we deal with, such as Title IX and Clery and res halls, and that I think that part of that training needs to be integrated with our community partners, with SHAC, WRC, Res Life, with any of the groups, and that the police officers need to be integrated and incorporated into this community.
I'm just curious, you brought up Title IX twice, I'm just curious what it is because I have no idea.
It's equal rights, equal access, that everyone, so oftentimes, for example, sexual assault can be a crime, it can be, but it also could be a Title IX violation. Yes, if it interferes with somebody's ability to access education.
So a follow-up. I'm still a little unclear as to whom exactly does or does not have input into designing this training curriculum. I know you mentioned yourself and the president is there. I mean, and I know you keep saying it's like a blank slate, but like, so who decides who gets input? And then afterwards, once that curriculum is decided, who implements the training? So if the state is only doing the minimal training, then who administers the mental health training, the community policing training, all of the other aspects that you're talking about going above and beyond what the state can provide?
Right, so there's various groups or organizations or companies that provide training. And so you have to, shop around and find out what's a legitimate product, what's more reflective of what you're trying to do.
So does that just get put out like as an RFP, like the way that
it could be an RFP, typically.
Building, or whoever comes up with the best proposal and the cheapest product, that's who we go with, or is there some sort of?
Well, I mean, I can tell you, I think we're already doing a lot of that training already. I can think of a number of issues and projects that we're working on, the CHAC's working on with mental health and physical health with CPSO. So the beauty of that is that would even continue in a way that would be helpful.
So then would SHAC be providing the mental health training to the sworn police officers?
We would not be providing it all because there's certain specialized training that goes into that. But what's nice is that we would have a big say in what we know needs to happen on the university because we're already partners.
Okay. So we don't really know yet who exactly would be providing and also we don't know exactly who would be designing the required or desired training.
I want to start by thanking some of our university administrators for being here. I realize this is a little bit out of the 9 to 5 window that most of us like to operate in. Thanks for being here. This is sometimes a less than pleasant conversation. I recently talked to one of the CPSO officers, and they talked about feeling stretched, like there were not enough of them to be covering campus. And so I was hoping you guys would talk a little bit. The number 2 million has been thrown around, 1.9 million, whatever. What I'm interested in is part of that increased staffing. I do have some concern for the experience of our officers. Do they have the resources to actually be able to handle campus in just sheer numbers? Do they have enough staff to support their mission? And in terms of the kinds of trainings additional trainings that our campus police force or whatever incarnation receives, I definitely would like to see continued collaboration with the WRC and SHAC, and to include the QRC and the MCC in that as a way to continue addressing some of those issues and really creating and building partnerships with groups that sometimes have felt marginalized and outcast traditionally by police forces.
Well, I would just say that I agree, and I think that that's one of the things that we have at the university is the ability to reach out to marginalized groups and to have that interaction. And we have officers that are liaison with the QRC, and we have officers that are liaison with the Viking vets, and we're able to assign those officers that liaison with different groups on campus.
Can you address the staffing issue?
We're grossly understaffed. We're way below the national average. We're 0.5 per 1,000 students. National average is 1.8 per 1,000. We have the urban 21 institutions. Those are the comparables that Portland State has identified as being similar to them in demographics, mission, location. We're the only one without a police department. Our numbers are abysmal compared to the rest of the urban 21.
And the expansion includes more staffing?
It does. Well, I mean, I would assume we're grossly understaffed. It needs to be addressed.
Thanks. Good evening, everyone. My name is Victor Mema. I am from your student government. I'm the academic affairs director. But before I, give you a little bit of my stance, I want to let you know that I'm brown, right? I'm Mexican. A lot of people have thrown. Hopefully, you can see that. People have thrown out the race card and several concerns, which, trust me, I share the same thing. I grew up in Beaverton, Oregon. And I also, about 8 months ago, I used to be undocumented, or what people would call illegal, right? And thankfully I fixed that, so don't worry, don't call immigration on me. So after looking at this issue really, really deeply and really going into what affects me right now, I'm just going to look at me for myself. I'm going to be very selfish. I looked at the issue really roughly, and I said, well, right now, actually, we do have a campus police that is armed. It's Portland Police. And we do have a campus police that is armed that doesn't really know what my life as a student is when I'm walking around campus, when I'm trying to advocate for all students as the academic affairs director. I don't care. But I do see a public safety office that does care, that I know Chief Zerzan by. I can say, hey, hello, Chief, how you doing? He will stop and talk to me. The public safety officer over there in the back, he was in one of our safety meetings because I want to have alcohol in one of my events for the Arab Persian Student Organization. And I just think, as a person of color who has been raised in this country, who, let's be honest, there's racism. When I first got my license, I got pulled over and they broke my speakers because they thought I had drugs. That's my experience. But when I came to Portland State with my experience and going through being involved, meeting administrators, meeting everyone who is supposed to be taking care of our public safety, I feel way safer than walking around out there in Portland with the Portland Police Bureau. That right there for me is a way bigger difference, and $1.9 million for a student to have access, to have better education. To me, I was the first person to graduate in my family and to come to college. Public safety is access. Not being harassed by law enforcement is access. Not that it always happens out there, but it does. And so for me, having a personal connection to my public police officers on campus is access, and it is a little bit of a relief, less stress, less pressure. I don't have to be worrying about getting arrested or getting harassed. And so I just wanted to make that clear. Nobody will be able to relate to how I've grown up, because I don't think a lot of you are undocumented or have been undocumented or are brown like me. Some of you are, but I just wanted to make that point, and obviously I do favor a campus police on campus.
I just have one quick statement, because I haven't really said anything about this openly to a whole bunch of people. I would like to know if CPSO has spoke to students in the Multicultural Center, has spoken to the diverse student body that we have here on campus. We have many organizations. Myself, as a person of color, I'm really interested in the issue because I know there's a lack of security on our campus, and I think that should be increased. My personal issue is that I don't think we need to necessarily address those issues by having armed police. That's my personal stance. And as a person of color, I could go into 1,000 stories that you've already heard. Chris told you about one he saw personally. But for me, it's more about the actual arming of our officers. And does that training for these officers include cultural competency? Does that include diversity training? Because I have yet to hear if that will be included as part of the training program. And does the current model for how officers are trained include that? Because, I mean, you can't really teach diversity. It's wordplay. You can go through the programs. You can answer the questions correctly. But then when it's taken away, the book's taken from in front of you, how do you then relate to people of color and people who identify outside the general populace? So that's my concern, is more about the training that these officers are going to have to handle our diverse campus, because we are the most diverse campus in the entire state of Oregon. And we all know the history of Oregon, so we don't have to talk about that. My issue is, what does this look like when you arm officers, and will they be culturally competent to deal with people from diverse backgrounds?
Just sort of piggyback off of that, I think that there is a definite anxiety with regard to the police, maybe since the Occupy movement, but also before. On the side of the students, I think the fact that we saw police show up in riot gear to peaceful protests has put people in a mood of nervousness, and I don't think that, or at least I know a lot of people who would be upset seeing armed policemen walking up and down campus, just as a emotional, visceral feeling. Beyond that, I am curious, you raised the point earlier, or I guess the question of how much of what's going on and how much of the problems that CPSO is trying to deal with is related to sexual violence. This is a very big problem, surely, but is that really all that we have to talk about here? It seems like that's been a big part of the discussion tonight, and there's got to be some other functions that CPSO carries out, and I'd be interested to see how a police force would better suit those. And then the final thing that no one has really answered yet is we're into, what is it, like an hour, 15 minutes into this thing, and we still don't know how this is going to affect our tuition. I'm just wondering if anyone's here yet with that information.
Go ahead, Dan.
There was a couple of questions he hasn't had a chance to answer.
So the Vice President hasn't made it here, and she's the financial guru. I can tell you that no part of this proposal involves an increase in tuition. This isn't tied into an increase in tuition. This isn't an excise task. This is asking the university, I'm asking the university to, within their means, adequately staff and fund the campus public safety function, which is a core function of the university to provide those services. So the Vice President would have to answer more specifically about what that looks like, but no part of this proposal is asking to put on an excise tax or increase student tuition to fund this.
Hi. May I speak?
Yes, sir.
My name is Bill Langmaid. I'm a SALC student, that's Senior Adult Learning Center student. Am I allowed to talk here as a, I only pay a little bit, not much, you know. They think I'm going to die pretty soon, so it won't make much difference. But I think the police presence on a campus should be benign. It's really important. My experience with law enforcement is that surveillance very quickly degrades to harassment, and that's unfortunate. And stings are conducted that result in the confiscation of the freedom of people. That, you have people like Army intelligence and Air Force intelligence on the campus. And these people run their stings. And those people can get all the information that is available on you, everything, including medical, absolutely everything. They get, these guys here, police, Chief of Police, is that your proper title?
Zerzan.
Zerzan? Okay, he just can barely touch that. They really have power. And they circulate around campus. They're here, how much more do you need? I like the idea of upgrading it looks dark out there. Why does it look so dark? Can we have more lights? Can we have some of the other things that were presented? And one thing I'd like to see especially is the training manual that you're all talking about. And there are questions here that just don't end. What is in there? And police officers are taught to lie. And many police officers are trained and practiced liars, kind of people you really wouldn't want to have as friends. Although you need them, you want to call them when you become a victim. So we do need them. We need good law enforcement officers. But the training is really poor. 4 months, one single program, we don't know anything about. We need to see that program. Chief of Police, could we put that on the internet, or at least to make it available here to the student body?
So the BPSST curriculum is online.
It is online?
It's online if you go to their webpage. And then as far as you're talking about our curriculum here, which doesn't exist yet because we haven't made that decision yet. So there's nothing to put online on what that FTEP program would look like, what the advanced training would look like.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Jesus. So, I don't like cops. Look at the way I dress, and look at the way I look like, and some other issues. But there's a lot of stuff that's been going on here tonight that's talking about prevention and whether or not we need them. And I don't know a lot about this issue. I've just been listening to people tonight. And from the sounds of it, we have to rely on Portland Police Department to respond to violent acts on our campus, which means that we have to wait. And then, as this gentleman over here pointed out, by the time they come, they might not want to talk about that anymore. It's too late. It's gone, right? So that's a victim down the drain. Nothing can be done anymore. It's over and done with. Prevention, that's cool. We have parking lots that are creepy, and we have places that are poorly lit. If people that are doing the crimes still know that we have to rely on Portland Police, and how long does that take for them to respond? What's going to change? Absolutely nothing. If you have a direct in-house representation whether armed or not armed, whether it's more, some people that are trained and able to be there when the crime happens, that's going to slowly, none of this is going to happen overnight. I feel like a lot of people are coming at this with like, well, it's not going to change overnight, so F it, you know, like, or they don't trust the police, so it's automatically going to go into them. I can say from very personal experience, CPSO has been the friendliest law enforcement I have ever come across. And that's just because either you are training them very well or your standards and morals are very high, and so that passes on through all of your security. But if you, yeah, we put lights up and everything like that and make this a more safer campus, that's not going to change if we still don't have an in-house representation. You know, it's very important. That's just my 2 cents, I think, because a lot of people are completely keep going back to the fact that, well, we don't need armed guards, but everyone keeps saying Portland State, we don't need it, but PDX police, if they're still not responding, how is anything going to change? And does anyone, if they don't want that, okay, we don't want CPSO to be an in-house police department, then how are you going to change that? What's going to happen? The statistics are just going to continue being negative and being 1 in 4 and all these numbers being thrown out. I would very gladly have more of my, there's shittier stuff that my tuition is going towards than safety. I think we would all agree with that. I'm sorry, I have a foul mouth. Look at me. So, yes. So that's what I wanted to say. If anyone has an answer to the question that if we don't have an in-house police force and we're still dealing with PDX, how is anything going to change? What is the point of being here? Also, to deal with the training that goes to the DPSST, I was a security guard for a little while. I don't really remember much. It was a terrible security job. But he said, you guys will go through that same training that has to go through the Oregon State law. And then once you bring it back here, like he said, it's a blank slate. And they've already said that students will have involvement in this, so we can help design how we need our officers to accommodate us. That goes with cultural diversity. So this is an issue that I feel like should be very obvious. If there's a blank slate and they get the training with the police and they're armed, and then we have the shack and everything. I'm sorry, I'm talking too much. All right, thank you.
The dean would like to.
Thank you. Very well put. The one thing I wanted to mention that I think this may have come up before I got here, I had to be a little bit late, but there are parts of campus that our campus public safety has no jurisdiction in right now. And that's one of my really big concerns. Do any of you live in University Point by any chance? So the university contracted with an outside entity to build a building called University Point. There are about 800 or so residents living there. A good number of those folks are students. Campus public safety has no jurisdiction in that building. So the only law enforcement that can respond to that building is Portland Police. And I don't know if any of you have had this experience, but I have to say I've had it more often than I'd like to mention, where I've called Portland Police because I needed them to respond and they wouldn't. And they said, no, that's a low-level situation. We've got a much higher-level situation that we're dealing with, and we don't have the personnel to dispatch to your suicide. We don't have the personnel to dispatch to your sexual assault that was between people who knew each other. So I personally am uncomfortable that we have contracted with folks who built a building that houses our students, and we can't respond to them if they have a really serious situation going on with law enforcement when law enforcement is required to address the situation. That's just one of the places, but this jurisdiction issue is embedded in this issue, and I think Phil covered that a little bit in the beginning, but I just wanted to name that again in response to your question about the difference between, we have Portland Police, they'll still come eventually, like they do now. This is just a different sort of imagination of what that could look like, I think, for our campus.
Yeah, so my main question is on compromise. So I'm wondering if this is a black and white proposal. Like, is there room for possibly, as much as I don't want to say this, increasing the number of police security guards on campus while we also increase the prevention programs available on campus? Like, a lot of great ideas have been put out there by speakers tonight. So I'm wondering if that can be part of this discussion in the spirit of student involvement and student participation. A lot of students want to see prevention programs as well as an increase in security, in the number of security guards. So just throwing that out there. And then my second question is, I guess I'm wondering ultimately how this decision will be made. Like, what are the mechanisms by which this will be carried through? Like, will it be sort of hearing student concerns and then making a decision, or is voting involved? I know that's really radical, but is this something that students could vote on, whether we want to put our money towards arming security guards or prevention, stuff like that? So, if you have anything to say on that, it'd be awesome.
So I don't know what that mechanism looks like. What I envision is that the university goes to the OUS and says, we want to do this. And I think that representation needs to be someone from the community. It needs to include students, and whether that's ASPSU representation or whatever, and that collectively we petition OUS to form a university police department. And I honestly don't think that this will happen without that student component.
So I'm going to channel Jessica Amo again, because she's not here, but if anybody in this room wants to be involved in prevention and you're not already, you could just walk over to Montgomery, where the Women's Resource Center is right now, or not right now, but tomorrow, and they'll set you up, and it's free. So being involved in helping to increase prevention efforts, being involved, I mean, you can get a t-shirt that says consent is sexy. There's all kinds of stuff that you could do that would help with raising awareness.
Wondering about what some tangible next steps would be after this forum. So it seems like there's a lot of different voices that we've heard, and I don't know necessarily if you guys have considered all these points. And the point of the forum was to create dialogue around this issue that a lot of us felt wasn't as transparent as we would have liked to be. So what I'm hearing you guys are saying is that the structure is already kind of set up what you want to do, but then there's room for this blank slate of oversight. So I'm just wondering if you do value student input, like you've stated multiple times, what is something that I can do that we can all do to come to you instead of just kind of vaguely oh, we care about your point? Is there something we can leave feeling like we can continue this conversation, or I guess if maybe someone could address specifically address that point.
So I'm going to rely on the represented student government for that, and what that looks like, because I don't know what other mechanism to use. I mean, I'm not going to have an election. I'm going to rely on the representative student government to come out with a position. And then what that position is we'll go forward with it.
Marlon, are you collecting names of folks who are here tonight? I know that's got an issue too, or people don't necessarily, but I would be really interested in, if we know who's here, continuing the dialogue, making sure that if there are next steps that could be communicated, even if you don't want to join ASPSU, if you just want to be a part of a listserv where there's information being shared as these steps sort of evolve and there's opportunities to be at a next meeting to talk about what those next steps are. So, but I appreciate the comment, because I've been in a lot of forums, as many of you probably have, where there's a lot of energy, there's a lot of good ideas, there's a lot of commitments made, and then you're sort of waiting for that phone call or that email, what's next. So I think if we could collect the folks' names who do want to be involved in further conversation, I would be happy to make sure that that communication happens in concert with our ASPSU folks.
One of the preventative ideas that I brought forward to Crystal Roberts, who just finished her law degree and works at the Equity Office, is to have a PTSD awareness campaign where we discuss what PTSD is and what are trigger words or rape trigger words. I was in a class where a professor talked about strangling a woman journalist because he didn't agree with her idea. That's Peter Bechtold in Middle East Studies. He also says Islamophobic things and Holocaust denial, etc. But the strangulation comment really resonated with me because I almost lost my life to a violent homicide that involved strangulation. So if we have widespread miseducation of teachers who may be experts in their fields but are very out of date when it comes to rape trigger words and triggering kinds kinds of situations, or gender-based discrimination in the classroom, that could be something that would be very powerful to start to set the tone about safety of all persons. Another huge issue, my mother works at Veterans Administration with military rape victims, and she will help coordinate Veterans Administration liaisons who are specialists in military rape to reach out to our veterans who they themselves may find stigma in terms of coming out with their military rape. And to reaffirm also, this is not just about rape, this is about homicide. I follow very closely the Oslo bombers killing, and that kind of thing could happen anywhere. And without our campus security, we're really going on blind trust here and an honor code. And I don't feel safe after the report in Vanguard where I realized the deep scarcity of officers on campus. Also, I'd like to point out the 795 settlement on the racism regarding the firing of the provost. Do not trust the administration of PSU. They've punished me for protesting the Abu Ghraib fundraiser, which involved lying and torture, which included sodomy and Abu Ghraib. I've sued the PSU Foundation once, and I'll sue them again, because that kind of blind disregard for campus security is activating triggers of racism. When I go to my Islamic students and say, hey, do you want to be called these epithets in the classroom? Do you want to have a fundraiser that involves torture in Abu Ghraib, or extraordinary rendition, or any of these horrifying things against Islam? Those are rape triggers for me, because there was rape in those prisons. And when the PSU can't come clean on their investments, our divestment campaign needs a very thorough global look. Thank you, guys. I've got a lot more to say if anyone wants to talk to me.
Thank you.
Was there somebody else, or?
No, you're good.
Okay. I guess Christina touched on a lot of what I wanted to say, but I guess I wanted to just kind of try and get this conversation away from the black and white that I think some of it has been, because at least for me and what I felt when organizing this event, was that what's more important to me is the way in which students are involved, and the sense that I've had that this is a decision that, even if it hasn't been, and even if it's been explicitly said that it's not, I still feel like this decision has been made, and the discussion we're having is how are we going to get students to participate in the way that has already been decided. I don't know for a fact who writes this proposal into, puts it in writing and says that it will definitively happen or not. That makes me uncomfortable. It makes me uncomfortable that the vast majority of students on campus don't know about this, and the vast majority of the people that I talked to were not comfortable with the idea that a decision like this could be made without their oversight. And on the subject of funding and student involvement, I thought it was kind of interesting that, there may not be an explicit ask for that money to come from tuition or student fee dollars, but the university, if the university is going to pay for that, it's my understanding that students pay for 80% of the university's budget. So wherever that money is coming from, it's at least somehow going to be coming from students. And if that's a decision that students are in favor of making, that's one thing, but it sounded to me like there are a lot of students in the room who are in favor of working on other approaches, and it doesn't sound like a lot of alternatives, if any, have really been explored thoroughly, what they could cost, and how students could be involved, and how anybody could be involved. And I personally found it a little patronizing to be said that if you want to work on prevention, you can go and volunteer at some place. Students take their personal time that they're not getting paid for, but if the administration has an idea for a program that will increase security on campus, that should be paid for by the university. At the end of the day, whatever we as a community, as all stakeholders, the administration, the faculty, and other workers, the urban community should be making this decision together, and there should be a unity on how it's done, how it's going to be paid for. And I think that if we're going to be willing to spend a bunch of money on improving our campus safety, that should include some other programs and funding for other programs and other avenues that can, statistically decrease the crime that we're talking about.
And up front now. So there are three things that I want to speak to quickly. One is that I'm an older student, so for some of the people in the room, I'm about twice your age. And when I was younger and when I was your age, Police were still, for the most part, respected in this country, but over the past 20 years, police have gone to being feared. And that is a concern I have. And that's why I am sad that there's really only one basic level of training available, and that probably a lot of work will be needed to be done to correct poor training that a police force will receive from the state. Because I am truly shocked at how poorly trained police are in this state. When I was growing up, police protected their communities. Now police seem to have a mentality that they're supposed to police their communities. They don't seem to have the mentality of serving the people. And I look at the city of Portland, and I see police who don't see themselves as working for the people. And I don't want that happening here. And I do trust Phil Zerzan to do a good job, and I trust Michelle very much. And so I hope that will stay in place. I will admit, I don't trust Vivel that much. I don't think that he is a person who puts students first. I think he puts university administration and funding first. And that's my experience with him for almost 2 years. I don't think he puts students first. But these two people do. And I very firmly appreciate their being here. But that is a concern I have, is I don't want a police force on campus that stops remembering that they're here to serve and protect students. And that would be their primary job, is to protect us and help us. They're not there to tell us the way things are. And that's an important one to me. Along those same lines, I would like to see, as a suggestion, less time spent in the cars and more time spent walking around. I think the police lately have been in the cars way too much. And they're not walking around. Communities that have police officers that walk around and know people and know them by name are safer communities. Communities that have police officers driving around are not as safe. And so I would like to see the cars used only when necessary. Get a couple of segways if you need to get across campus quickly. This campus isn't that big. Students make it across campus without a car. Our police can too, or our current CPSO. And the third thing is that funding will come from the students. If it's an increase in the amount that the university has to spend, unless we can get something from the state, which is not so likely, funding is going to come from the students. So do understand that we are the ones who will end up paying for it. But it may be that the different things that have been said, I want better lights out there. I want a feeling of being able to walk across campus and being safe all the time. And there are times that it's not so that way. There are times it's a little scary. There are the preventative stuff that can be done. But it does sound like the people who have mentioned it are right. Right now, Portland Police Bureau is our armed police. This might be a better idea. Thank you.
We have time for one last question or comment.
Yeah, I'm going to break the rules and speak right now. So yeah, it's funny, I actually asked a campus security officer a couple years ago why they needed Crown Victorias to drive around campus. And he told me, oh, we need to be able to arrest people and put them in the back of the car. So like, that's a power they have apparently. I was like, well, do they really need to go that fast? He was like, well, yeah, sometimes we get on the freeway to go from one side of campus to the other, we have to be able to go like 75. So that's cool. I guess they have rapid response time, which is interesting. $2 million is going to come from somewhere, and it's going to go somewhere. That's a lot of money. If it's not coming from our tuition, it's not like, are you going to get new revenue? Are you going to cut academic departments, like is happening a lot actually recently? My department, Spanish, has been cut significantly over the last couple of years, and right now they're talking about cutting Chiron studies entirely. So this is really something you want to introduce into the budget. And, prevention, like, yeah, we can do it right now, but how much prevention can $2 million buy, or is that throwing money at nothing? Yeah, we have 4 full-time staff members. How many full-time staff members for preventing rape can $2 million buy? A lot of them. And my last point is that the Portland police office is still, it's like, what, like 8 or 10 blocks away, your central precinct? That's like really close. And like, I know it is really unfortunate that, you know, people who have been victims of sexual assault, you know, they get prioritized low. It takes a while for them to, you know, get to the police. But I just want to point out that, like, this narrative is not making sense to me. Because if I am in student housing and I call the police and I say, hey, my friend across the hall is getting raped, can you come on down? I bet you anything they would be there in 2 minutes. And campus security would also be there in 2 minutes. And I bet you that rapist would not have a gun. Which brings me to another thing. I just want to ask you officials, because I feel like this issue is kind of glossed over, and that's the issue of firearms. You sort of said that you were opposed to having firearms on campus, which is not like what I read in the Vanguard article. So I just wanted to clarify if all of you could say, do you support or oppose having firearms in the hands of campus security and or police officers? And if you oppose them, would you fight to not let that happen? Sorry, that took so long.
It's an emotional topic.
Right. So what I said was that per the flyer, I am not proposing that we arm guards. What we are proposing is a campus police department, and police in the United States and Oregon are armed. So I am proposing that we form a